Hello. Okay, so I think we should give it like a few minutes for people to join. Give me 1 second. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Feel free to write something in the chat, say hi. We're going to give it a few minutes before we kind of get started talking about the H1B registration. I know some people will be trickling over time. Um, Hi, Aditya. How are you? Hi, Judy. Hi, Renosha. Hi, Deval. No worries. Hi, Michelle. Just to let everyone know, we're gonna like walk through questions towards the end of the conversation. So I'll hold off, especially with you, Deval. I understand that you're asking a question right now. It's just that by the time we're ending the conversation, I'm worried that your question's gonna be buried. We'll let everybody here know when to type in or add a question. Okay. Actually, Deval, I think I can answer your question quickly because I just read through it. Essentially, lottery registrations and selections are not restricted to a law firm. So even if our firm were to do it for you, you can take that selection notice to another attorney because that is your right. For us, if we were to get the selection for you, we would email you the copy of the selection notice. USCIS does not mail us a copy, not anymore at least. So you can take that wherever you would like to take that. I do think though, Deval, the only downside is that potentially you wouldn't be able to do an online filing. I think the online filing is restricted to whoever enrolled you into the lottery, and they would need to do a paper filing instead. But the only difference between the two is maybe like the mailing cost, and I think there's like a $30 fee difference between the two as well. Okay. I think Anna, we'll give it like another 3 minutes, like make it like 5 minutes even. Just to kind of get everybody on like the same page and like what's happening on this webinar, we're going to be walking through the H1B registration, call it like a general overview. We're also going to talk about what happens after the registration process and when you win the lottery, what to expect out of that process, and then we'll leave some room for question and answers towards the end to address any specific questions related to the presentation or anything maybe about let's say a specific matter. The only thing is that we try to keep some of the questions a little bit more general, primarily because when you're doing a public presentation like this, I myself as an attorney have to be very careful about the kind of legal advice that I'm providing. So essentially try to keep the questions a little bit more general. If it's something more specific, I'll let you know that my answer might change based on the specifics of your case. It doesn't really substitute for a formal consultation for some of the weirder scenarios that are out there. No problem, Deval. I think one of the things that I did want to reassure a lot of people sometimes, especially given that we're already in the first Friday after the lottery opening, is that there is still more than enough time to really get the lottery registration going. We have until March 24th. By noon. It's not like the lottery closes on the weekend. Trust us that here at Manifest, we're going to be kind of burning the candle on both ends to make sure that everybody gets submitted in a timely fashion. Okay, cool. So we're approaching the 5 minute mark. I'll get started pretty shortly, literally like ticking time to 30 seconds. Makun, I can touch upon that very quickly. There is no difference between you submitting the H-1B registration on the first day it opens versus the last day that it is open. Okay, so let's kind of get started in terms of the conversation related to the H-1B registration. Literally, the title here says it all: the who, the what, when, where, and why of the process. Very quickly, to briefly introduce myself, my name is Nicole Gunara. I'm the principal attorney here at Manifest Law. I've been working in immigration over a period of 7 years, held various leadership positions at prestigious law firms. A lot of my areas of expertise include talent visas, business immigration, as well as certain types of investment-related visas like the E1 and the E2 and the L1. But generally speaking, I would like to think that my coverage includes anything and everything related to having you work, reside, remain, and be in the United States. But enough about me. I see that there's an old slide there. The first thing that I want to talk about is the important dates to remember. First and foremost, there's essentially a series of dates that are the most important here. March 7th is when the lottery registration opens. March 24th is when the lottery registration closes. And then on or about March 31st, 2025. And the reason why I say on or about is because sometimes the government is early, sometimes the government is late. They are rarely on time when it comes to sending out the notifications for winners, but you should expect on or about that date that you would get an email, or our organization will get an email that notifies whether or not you've won the lottery. April 1st is the first day that you're going to be eligible to submit the full H-1B lottery submission. Essentially, starting from that date all the way until June 30th is when you're allowed to submit the petition that argues to the government why you qualify for the H-1B. I'll be talking about some of these segments much more specifically as we go through the presentation. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the lottery process, right? So what is the H-1B lottery? The H-1B lottery is a random selection process that's used by USCIS to allocate H-1B work visas due to the high demand. So to try to keep it as fair of a playing field as possible, I like to envision that the US government hits a big red button and immediately randomly selects whoever would win this particular lottery season. In terms of who is eligible, foreign nationals with a U.S. job offer in a specialty occupation that requires at least a bachelor's degree to fulfill are the ones that are eligible. I would like to emphasize that it needs to be a bona fide job offer. Intention really does matter when it comes to the H-1B lottery. In terms of who wins, I want to kind of focus on the fact that there's two parts or two segments of the lottery process. The first is the master's cap. Essentially, the government sets aside 20,000 visas for U.S. advanced degree holders. So people who have graduated here in the United States with a U.S. master's degree or above would qualify for this special segment. And then there's the regular cap, which is a reserve of about 65,000 visas, which includes all unselected master's candidates and other applicants. So if, let's say, you had a master's degree from a university here in the US and you didn't win out of the 20,000 that is allotted for the US master's holders, you're actually put into the second lottery, which is the 65,000. But I want to make it clear, even though I called it the second lottery, it's all simultaneously done. It's all done by the time March 31st rolls around. In terms of your odds, there's about a 1 in 4 chance of winning the particular lottery, but it does change year over year. I've had years where it's like 1 in 5, 1 in 6, but I've also had years where it's closer to like 1 in 3 and 1 in 3.5. So when it comes to what is the registration process, essentially, in order to attempt the H-1B visa, employers must submit an online registration for potential candidates during a designated registration period between March 7th and March 24th. I want to make it clear, it's a very simple form. It's very much just information about your organization that's sponsoring you, information about yourself, like your passport information, your date of birth, your name. And essentially, that's all the government really needs for the registration. And that's precisely the reason why we're offering this for free at Manifest Law. We don't necessarily think it's a very burdensome process. We want to encourage employers and employees to enroll into the H-1B lottery. country. So because of that, we're kind of offering this really, really cool promotional program. In terms of how you can do this, essentially how it's done is that the employer or the business would need to create a My USCIS organizational account, which would give them access to an online form. One account can be used to enroll multiple candidates. So if there's an employer who is interested in enrolling 3 different individuals, you don't need 3 accounts. You really only need 1. The account would then send an invitation to our firm to be added as a legal representative. Once that account is linked, please bear in mind that sometimes with the USCIS system, it can take a few business days for us to receive the links. We've kind of developed a workaround. We have multiple attorney accounts that we can utilize, and we've been evenly dividing them. What we realized is that if there's too many link requests for one account, it can delay kind of when those links arrive in our end of the portal. So we've kind of created 3 or 4 different accounts for you to link to. That being said, a registration statement and filing is then drafted by our organization for your organization and your company and yourself to review to make sure that everything and the information that is there is accurate. And once the organization approves that draft, the filing is then submitted to USCIS. In terms of what information you need, I really divided between 2 boxes: what the company needs to provide and what the foreign national needs to provide. A company would need to provide full business name, DBA. So if your company has a trade name, that's something that we would want to know. But to make it clear, this is like a formal designation. So you would have needed a DBA certificate or a trade name registration in order to really have a DBA. We would also need an EIN number, the employer identification number, which is like a tax number that's assigned to every single organization here in the United States. We also need the company contact information and address, the physical address that belongs to the business, or the I guess let's call it agent address or organization's address. And then we also need the company's signatory information, who representing the company has the right to be the signatory or to authorize the submission of this application. With regard to a foreign national, the foreign national would need to send to us a passport biographic page that includes your passport number, your date of birth, your full name, and where you were born. We would also need your education credentials. We just need some information on whether or not you have at least a bachelor's degree. If you don't have a bachelor's degree, we need to know the number of years of experience that you have. And if you have higher than a bachelor's degree, then great, let us know. And we will also need the employee or you, the foreign national's contact information as well. In terms of Manifest's role in the application, how do we help? We provide extremely clear instructions for the organizational accounts. So we do send very, very clear emails with individual steps along with screenshots to kind of advise someone on how to add us to the account and also how to create the account in the first place. We also draft the registration filing. We also double check the information to make sure this is what the government is looking for. It is a little bit of a collaborative process. At the end of the day, I don't know your company's EIN number. I can only fill in what they provide. But if something looks a little bit off, we would definitely flag it to you. So that's what we also call the final submission review, making sure everything is as clean as proper as possible for that submission. We also do ad hoc calls and meetings where required if we feel that someone is really struggling to add someone to an organization account, or maybe your employer is just someone who just doesn't really deal much with computers. We can kind of walk them through step by step on what needs to be done to get there. And why us? Again, waiving the attorney's fees. We're a very pro-immigration firm. We really do believe in supporting the foreign national here in the United States and also supporting employers as well. We realize that sometimes the biggest hurdle to committing to a lottery process is the cost that is involved in the lottery. Employers sometimes hesitate to hedge their bets because while some firms might charge almost closer to $1,000 or even $750 to kind of get this done, it feels sometimes to an employer that they might not get anything in return. So if I try to waive as much of that fee as possible, I think it would create a better scenario for the foreign national to work for that organization, because the organization is more likely to move forward with your case if you have the lottery win in hand, right? The only cost that unfortunately we cannot waive is the USCIS filing fee of $215 per applicant. So like I mentioned before, on or about March 31st, each account will be notified on who has been selected and who has not. If you've been selected, then congratulations, you are now eligible to file the full H-1B application. If you're not selected, then it's not the end of the world just yet. There's generally multiple rounds of selection. So what do I mean by multiple rounds of selection? So if you remember the quotas that I mentioned earlier about 80,000, 85,000 visas that are out there. Sometimes people who win, they don't move forward with their case for whatever reason. So those slots actually go back into the pool for other people to be selected. If a second round does occur, it would usually occur sometime in August. Sometimes it bridges into October, but it's usually around that timeline approaching the fall. If that's too late, we can talk about some options on a case-by-case basis to kind of buy yourself some time here in the United States, just to kind of maybe hedge your bets against a potential second round, or maybe take a different approach to get some work authorization here. Some of the most common inquiries related to the lottery process that we receive is, number one, do I need an employer? The first answer is generally yes, you need an employer and their consent in order to be enrolled in the lottery. There is an exception though. There is a way to self-sponsor yourself towards the H-1B if you have your own startup. If you own a majority, that's okay. What matters more actually is whether the startup is established, real, and operating. I see like there's a really quick question here that I can answer, which is, do I have to re-register for the second round? The answer is no. You're automatically put into that pool for the second round. There is no need to re-register. The government also sends out notices of when there is no more rounds happening, and that's when you know that you have to wait until next year and do this re-enrollment process again. But going back into my point, which is the startup mechanism, the startup has to be pretty real, pretty operating. The government is not happy to just have a shell organization sponsoring someone that was just formed. But at the bare minimum, we need a company, an EIN number as well, along with a corporate address to get you enrolled. Last point on that matter is that when you win, that win is tied to the organization that got you that win. So it's not when you get the selection notice or when you win the lottery, you can start jumping to a different employer to sponsor you. So whoever enrolls you in the lottery and whoever wins in that lottery, it needs to be tied to that organization. Next question that we generally get is an employer required to move forward with the full H-1B if a candidate wins? The answer is no. An employer is not required to move forward with the full H-1B, even if a candidate wins. At any time, they can terminate the process or opt not to move forward with the application. Next question that we get is, can multiple employers enroll me into the lottery? The answer is yes. Multiple independent companies can enroll you in the lottery. However, this does not improve your chances. I would say like 3 years ago, and even beyond that, the government did realized that a lot of people were filing with like 5 or 6 different employers, and it did give them a leg up in the lottery process. So starting in last year's lottery into now, the government evened the playing field and said, hey, the wins are done on a per person basis. That's why this time around and last time around, they required us to provide your passport information, your date of birth, etc. So now we're going to talk about what happens after we win, right? So if you do win the lottery, you get that selection notice, talk to your employer, and if the employer decides to move forward, a full H-1B application must be compiled and submitted to USCIS by June 30th of 2025. So this full H-1B application is really where we argue the merits of the case, because as I mentioned in the lottery process, they're really asking for the bare minimum information, right? So what they usually ask for is a petitioner letter or job offer letter that explains the role, why it is a specialty occupation, and why the candidate can fulfill the role. Give you a very clean, simple example is that you would explain that the role is a graphic designer, why a graphic designer would require a bachelor's degree, and why this particular individual has the degree or the education to fulfill that particular role. The next item that is needed is something known as an LCA, or a labor condition application. This is more of a technical process. I wouldn't worry too much about it on you personally, but essentially the government expects the employer to notify people at the work site that they're hiring an H-1B employee. Once that notification is made, we submit a certification to the government that that notification is made, and also informing the government of how much you would be paid as an employee. But that's, again, a very technical process that would be manifest burden to fulfill. We also would require a submission of your educational credentials, copies of your diploma, also with your resume. And then lastly, evidence of the company's existence and the worksite location. The government wants to make sure that this is a real company, that you're going to have the work. So information that we can provide to them about the company's existence is always very helpful. So what does this entail for the employer? The employer generally must, and I'm realizing that the screen might be blocking it a little bit, but let me fix that. So what does it entail for the employer? The employer must affirm that the government, via signing forms, that you have a bona fide, oh, there's another option here. Oops, sorry, it's blocking the screen. Okay, so going back to it, what does it entail for the employer? The employer must affirm to the government via signing forms that this is a bona fide job offer, that this is a real job, and that the information that we provided to them is true. So the EIN number is accurate. The fact that you're going to be paid X amount of money is also accurate. That's very important in the application. The employer must also be financially responsible for the H-1B's attorney's fees and filing fees. So sometimes a lot of people ask me, like, can I pay for the attorney's fees and the filing fees? The answer is no. The government has made this very, very clear that the organization has to pay for it. Sometimes there's conversations about penalization, like, oh, can I just, have them like take it out of my check? The answer is no. They should treat you as fairly as possible. One thing to emphasize to a lot of employers is that all employment, even on the H-1B, is at-will employment. So just because you've been approved and are working on an H-1B doesn't mean that you can't be terminated. So even if it's been approved for a 3-year period, you can be terminated at any time during that period of time, barring some state-specific or community-specific rules. So what happens when you are approved for the final H-1B? So once we filed the full petition and the government comes back saying, congratulations, you've been approved for the full H-1B. Once you're approved starting on October 1st or whenever the application is approved thereafter, so anytime after October 1st, the employee is now on a formal work visa that is valid for a 3-year period that can be extended for a total of 6 years. The 6-year limit can be bypassed through a green card application. So once you're at a certain stage of a green card application, you can extend beyond the 6-year timeline. But that's really for a separate conversation. There's like a whole analysis for that and what can be done. The biggest benefit of the H-1B is that it provides stability for a foreign national employee and can improve employee retention, right? You never want to have a really, really strong and qualified employee really be worried and stressed about whether or not they can even live in the United States. So the H-1B is a really, really good way to provide them some level of stability. The H-1B positive companies can compete for highly skilled talent as well in an environment where there's just not enough STEM US graduates to fill the demand. You'd be surprised on how easy it is to fulfill a position when you do offer some level of sponsorship. Employees can also easily travel by acquiring an H-1B visa stamp on their passport. So once your H-1B is approved and you decide to go abroad and you get the stamp into your passport, the chances of a denial on an H-1B is quite difficult. Essentially, the government needs to have a very specific reason to deny someone that visa stamp. Again, case-by-case specific analysis, but the reality is that the H-1B visa stamp is quite powerful. Lastly, it's a dual intent visa, which means that the employee will have no issues when it comes to considering a green card. The questions that get asked when you travel back into the country become very different, so it's something to note as well. So post-lottery win, common inquiries. So these are some of the common questions that we have. Are there other notable requirements for the employer? Number one is that employees on an H-1B must be paid on a formal payroll, not on a 1099 basis. H-1B employees must also be entitled to the same benefits as other employees in similar positions with similar credentials. So you can't treat someone who's on an H-1B that much less from anybody else who is with the same level of education and credentials as that person. Can the role for the filing be a part-time job? The answer is yes, absolutely. Part-time jobs are equally acceptable. The lowest we have ever seen get approved is 5 hours per week. It's better to try to target 15 to 20 hours per week. Sometimes this is a negotiating point for a lot of individuals who are interested in the H1B, which is that, hey, can you just put me on part-time then? Like, if you're worried about the cost burden, this is a really good, accurate way to do it. But truly, it must become a part-time role then. Is there a minimum salary requirement? The answer is yes. The minimum salary or hourly wage depends on the geographic location of the role, along with the occupational code and job type it falls under. You can check with Manifest, like reach out to us for assistance or go onto the website that I've linked here. We can also share this presentation after the call with anyone who requests it. Essentially, when you go on this website, you can actually plug in your job title or like your occupation. You can put where you're currently working out of or where you're perceived to be working out of, and it will actually let you know what the wage levels are. At minimum, you need to have what is known as a wage level 1, but don't hesitate to reach out to us. Evan, in terms of total comp or hourly rate, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but what I will say is that that's just the salary. It would be gross pay. I don't believe the government counts, though, benefits in terms of value for that. It's literally like, are you being paid at a rate that is equivalent to $50,000 a year gross? The answer is yes or no. Sanam, this session is being recorded. I don't believe that we're going to really be publicizing this. Bonus is not included in this. In terms of estimated time, burden, and also the costs, right? For the lottery process for the company, they should be expecting to spend about 30 minutes to an hour in the lottery process. And I'm being very, very, let's call it conservative about this, because it does take a lot less time than you think. When it comes to the filing process, like post winning the lottery, it can take about 2 to 3 hours. It does depend on the case complexity. When it comes to the foreign national, it's a lot less. It's really just a provision of documents for the lottery process, and the same thing goes for the filing process. In terms of the costs, right, that's kind of like the magic word. After you win the lottery, Manifest is more than happy to help support the filing of your full application. Listed here is our standard attorney fee and our money back plan attorney fee. Difference between the two is literally in its name. If you pay the higher fee, you're paying for insurance, because if your case were to be ultimately denied, post an RFE or annoyed, for example, you would get a percentage back refund of that initial legal fee that you paid to us to file that full H1B filing. In terms of the filing fees, ballpark anywhere from $2,000 to $3,500. It's subject to the government filing fee charts and maybe any sudden changes to the rules, but that's what we're anticipating employers would need to pay along with those attorney's fees. We also have a lot of flexible payment plans, so please talk to us if you have any concerns. We really do try to work with you. And I'm also going to make a gentle reminder for everyone that just because you won with us doesn't mean you can't work with another attorney. You can always take your selection notice and bring it to a different attorney. Please, don't feel like we're being insulted by it. We do want to work with you, but we understand that everyone has their own needs, and I want you to always work with the attorney that you're most comfortable with. So now we're in the Q&A time, right? I'm more than happy to answer some of the questions that I see flooding through the comments. I try to answer some of them on the way, but we do get some questions here. So that being said, I'm going to try to scroll up and see if there's a few questions that I can answer here, right? Let's see here. So